Hello, friends. Happy Tuesday. It's time for another episode of Tuesday Live at 5. This is Lena Gersa. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator from Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. And today I am feeling all the fall vibes with the Gathering Together suite, an online exclusive suite by Stampin' Up! Now, this suite just released at the beginning of September, and it is absolutely stunning. I cannot get enough of the colors and the patterns, and you're going to see lots and lots of samples at the end of the show today. But we're going to make 3 cards together today. I'm going to show you all the products in the suite. Because it's an online exclusive, it can be easy to miss some of them if you're not shopping by suite when you're in the online store. So I'm going to show you all the products, and then we will make 3 cards. Does that sound good? Now, before I get going, I want to just point out that today was the day that Stampin' Up! Launched their first ever advent calendar. Now, this is a 12 days of crafting advent calendar. It went live for purchase today. I just ordered mine. There was no demonstrator pre-order on this, so I haven't seen it. It's just as exciting for me as it is for anybody else. But these are available now in my online store, and only while supplies last. So if you are a crafter and the Santa in your life is looking for an idea for you for the holidays, this would be a great thing to suggest. Also a great gift. The products in the calendar are not seasonal. So they are multi-purpose, multi-occasion. They're not seasonal. So the idea is that you can open it during the holiday season and then use them all year long. Okay. All right. I am going to flip to my desk and show you the products here. While I'm doing that, let me know that you're here. Give me a hello and let me know where you're watching from, so that I can give you a shout out. So Gathering Together includes this Gathering Moments bundle. So I love, love, love these distinctive stamp images in this bundle. I'm going to show you some tips for how to get a quality image with these stamps. If you haven't used distinctive stamps before, there's a couple little tricks to making sure you get the best possible image. So I will show you that in a little bit. And then we have some lovely gratitude sentiments in beautiful fonts, and then a couple of little textural elements as well. And then, of course, we've got coordinating dies. So open dies to cut out all of our stamped foliage. And then these 2 large dies. So there's an open die that'll just cut an oak leaf or a maple leaf shape. But when it's used with this insert, it'll actually cut a leaf that you can then stitch veining onto. So if you are a stitcher as well as a stamper, this bundle is for you. So that is the Gathering Moments bundle. And then we also have a gorgeous new embossing folder. You're going to see this on the second card that we use, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. It's hard to see the pattern anyway on the camera, but you'll see it embossed in a few minutes. It's called the Gathering Leaves embossing folder, and it is just so, so pretty. So stay tuned on that one. I think the star of the suite is the stunning Designer Series paper. So the paper has champagne foil accents and this gorgeous fall color palette. So we've got, our crushed curry and our Cajun Craze and early espresso. And there's some old olive and gold, or champagne, I should say. This one's a little bit more muted with the basic beige. Love this subtle plaid. Again, look at that gold shine, or champagne. The foil, let's just say foil. To me, it looks gold. They say it's champagne though. This is a beautiful pattern that's really hard to see on camera. It's got these really subtle basic beige leaves and acorns and whatnot, and then this beautiful sort of texture in the foil. And then here is the last foil pattern with a basic beige backdrop. And then of course, when we flip over, we've got some beautiful, more subtle patterns that can be used as sort of a background for these stunning foiled patterns. We've got a basic beige wash. We've got a beautiful plaid in Cajun Craze. We've got some early espresso, looks like little pebbles. We've got a bit of a grid pattern in basic beige. We've got a bark pattern in early espresso. And then the little oak leaves in Cajun Craze. So just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful pack of paper. And then, of course, we have embellishments. So because of the stitching element in the die set, is a 2-pack of linen thread. We've got Early Espresso and Old Olive. I think you get, what, 25 yards of each? 15 yards of each. Okay. And then we also have these beautiful Cajun Craze and gold foil dots. Now, I don't know, they're not going to show especially well on the camera, but they're pretty and shimmery. All right, so that is the suite. Now, before I get going, let's just see who's joining us here. We've got Becky. Hi, Becky in Kansas. Welcome. Hi, Christine and Sue. Hi, Laura. Hi, Linda. Welcome. Hi, Janet and Jeannie K. Hi, Mary and Kathy and Renee, Lauren and Gail and Becky and April. Welcome, welcome. All right. So here is the first project. So I wanted something quick and easy to start. This is a layout I like to use when I have DSP that I really want to showcase. I'm just going to adjust that light and see if I can get it a little bit brighter. So super easy, all about the DSP. So let me show you how to get this look. So to start, I just have a 3x4-inch piece of that beautiful leaf pattern designer series paper. And I'm going to bring in my trimmer, and I'm going to see if I can get this on the camera here. And with the 4-inch side at the top, I am going to cut 1-inch strips. So I'm just going to line up that left edge of my paper at 1 inch and go 1 and 2, and one more cut will give us 4 strips. There we go. Okay, now I want to keep those pieces in order just because it can be a little bit tricky. This is such a random pattern in the DSP that if you don't keep your pieces in order, it can be a little bit of a puzzle to get them reassembled. All right, so we are going to layer that on a piece of Early Espresso cardstock that is 2.5 by 4.5. Okay, and the easiest way to do this, again, is to use your grid paper. So I'm going to line up my espresso piece so it's nice and square on my grid paper. And then I'm going to lay out my strips. So I'm going to make sure that my bottom edge of each strip lines up at that 1/4 inch grid line below the edge of my cardstock. And now that I've got it laid out, I'm going to make my borders a little bit narrower. I'm just going to slide them in so that I have about 1/16 of an inch between them. Okay. Once I've got those lined up, then I can go ahead and glue them on. So we'll start with this guy, just a little bit of glue. You don't need a lot. And again, I'm going to make sure that that bottom edge is lined up and make sure it's straight, because if you get the first one crooked, you're kind of sunk for the rest. All right, so that one's on, and here's number 2. Slide that in just a smidge. This is why I like using liquid glue, because I can adjust as I go here. Whoops. Stick the finger in the glue. Always makes it interesting. Here we go. Oh, I think my paper shifted a little bit. That's okay. All right, so you get the idea. So we've got our vertical sort of arrangement there, and then it's really just a matter of layering our pieces onto our card front. So this piece is 4 by 5.25 inches, and we are going to adhere this to that DSP piece. It's just the back side of the same pattern, but we're going to use some dimensionals to pop it up. So let me find a sheet of dimensionals. Whoops, don't stick there. And we'll get rid of our backings and pop this on. Now, this is one that I like to stand up to do. Anytime I'm gluing anything large that has dimensionals, I feel like I need to stand to be able to get it centered. I don't know whether it's because my chair is a little bit higher. It's a drafting height desk. I don't know. Anyway, there we go. There is my card front. So we're going to go ahead and glue that onto a card base that is 4 1/4 by 11 inches. It's Early Espresso, scored at 5.5. So we will go ahead and adhere this. You're right, April, the camera does not do justice to this DSP. I 100% agree with you. It's one of those that you really have to see in person. Even the imagery on the website, it's so pretty. So I'm just going to glue this centered onto my card base here. And Charlie, you're in snowy Colorado. Snow already? And people say Canada gets a lot of snow. It is feeling like mid-July here this week. It's very warm and humid. It's very unusual. All right, so I have this little label that I've die cut using the traditional labels dies, and I'm going to stamp my Thankful for You sentiment in Early Espresso ink. So we'll ink that up and stamp away. And then I have several leaves here that I've just fussy cut from the DSP. So we're just going to arrange them on the back of our label. So to do that, I'm going to put a bunch of seal just on the back of my label. And then I'm going to start with my little Cajun Craze leaf. And then my Basic Beige one. And add a little bit more seal. And then I'm going to tuck the Espresso one kind of in between. And then I have this last little bitty Cajun Craze one. I think I can maybe tuck that in and get it to adhere there. And there we go. There's our cute little arrangement. And then we're going to add a little bit of texture with some twine. So again, I'm going to add some more seal to the back. And I'm going to take my linen thread and just wrap it around 3 fingers. I don't know, 3 or 4 times. Slide the loops off my fingers, and I'm going to make sure that the ends are hidden behind my little arrangement here. So I'm just going to stick it down onto that seal that I put down and make sure that it's kind of secured, and then I can kind of play around with my loops. So I need them to be a little bit bigger so that I can see it kind of peeking out from behind my leaves. So we're just going to tease it and pull at it until we have something that makes us happy. There we go. All right, so a couple of dimensionals here. So yes, this is double popped. If that is something that concerns you in terms of thickness for postage, you don't necessarily need to pop this layer. You could certainly glue it flat. I just like the extra dimension of having it popped up. And then that's going to go on just towards the bottom of my panel there. Okay, and then, oh, for a minute there, I thought I glued that on upside down. Our last touch are some of our Cajun Craze and gold dots. So I'm going to just use the medium and the small dots. I'm not going to use the large on this one, just because it's a fairly small scale little arrangement. I don't want the large dots to kind of overpower that. And there we go. There is number 1. Now I just had this extra strip, so I figured I would glue it on and pop this inside just because I didn't want to lose it. So I've just got a 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of white cardstock, and then this is a 3/4 by 4 inch strip that I had kicking around on my desk, and I thought, you know what, we're just going to glue that inside. And then, of course, you could certainly stamp another sentiment on the inside if you wanted to. But for now, we're just going to stick that inside and call it a day. All right, so that is number 1 done. The sentiment is from the same stamp set. It's from the Gathered Moment set. So there are lovely sentiments and lovely fonts in this set. Okay, all right, moving on. Number 2. So this one's a little bit more stamping. So here is the one we're going to make, and you can see I've got that beautiful gathered leaves embossing folder in the background. So let me show you what that looks like without all the stuff on it. So this is a Cajun Craze cardstock. It's 4 by 5 1/4 inches, and then I've embossed it using the gathered leaves embossing folder. So pretty. All right, so we're going to start with that. And then I have a large oak leaf that I've cut from the DSP. I'm using that sort of bark pattern. And we're going to glue that directly onto our embossed panel. Let me just use a little bit of seal here just for speed. And we're just going to pop that on just at a bit of an angle. That's going to form a backdrop for our little label and leaves. All right. We got lots of bits here. Now, actually, before we do that, we're going to add our twine. So I've got, again, my early espresso twine. I have to say, I think I've gone through 2-to-1 rolls of espresso versus old olive. I use so much brown and so many neutrals when I design at this time of year that I just am reaching for the early espresso far more than the olive. Not that I don't like the old olive. I just am not using as much of it. All right, so I'm just taking a length of twine. I folded it in half so that I get a double thickness. Did I cut that too short? I may just have. Let's see. Oh, no, we're just going to make it. All right, so we're going to put a glue dot on the back of our panel here. I'm going to take that folded end of my twine and just press it into the glue dot. And then run it across the front of my panel. Hopefully straight. And then another glue dot, and wrap and stick. Okay, so there is my twine, all good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and glue that onto our card base. So I have a Crumb Cake cardstock base. It's 5.5 by 8.5, scored at 4 1/4. So we'll fold that in half, and then go ahead and glue our embossed panel on. Again, I like to use liquid glue whenever I'm dealing with embossed cardstock, just to make sure I get good adhesion in all those little nooks and crannies. So there we go. Give that a bit of a burnish, make sure it's well adhered. All right, so now let's spend some time on our focal image. So I have a label. This is cut using the branching out dies. This is my new favorite set of label dies. I love the shape. There, I think, are 7 sizes that all nest and layer. And I'm stamping this beautiful Expressing Heartfelt Gratitude sentiment in early espresso ink. So I'm just going to stamp it centered on my label here. And then I'm going to show you some little tips and tricks for stamping your leaves. So there are several different sort of foliage images in this set. We've got this large Cajun Craze, or well, a large oak leaf, a smaller oak leaf. We've got this sort of rounded leaf. We've got a little acorn. We've got some berries. So I'm going to stamp a few of these just to give you some tips for how to get the best possible image. I don't know why I have this extra one, so I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to stamp a couple of these and show you. Excuse me. Major frog in my throat. Okay. So I'm doing my little trick with stamping where I cut the blanks. I'm going to ink my stamp. And then I'm going to flip my blank over and lay it on top of the inked image and press with another black. Okay. Quick and easy way to stamp and cut a whole, or stamp and die cut a whole bunch of different images. Whoops, not that color. We're going to use Cherry Cobbler with this one. So I'm making my little berries here. And I'm stamping. Now, when you are using distinctive stamps, your ink pads need to be a little bit on the dry side. If you have super juicy ink pads, you will not get a great quality image, because the ink, actually, you can even kind of see on this. You see how the ink is kind of beaded there along the edges? Oh, maybe you can't. There. You can kind of see how it's kind of beaded there. If your ink pads are too juicy, that will happen. So there are a couple things you can do. You can take a plastic spoon or your bone folder and just massage your pad a little bit. That will press the ink down into the foam. And then when you ink your stamp, it won't be quite so juicy. Okay. Now I want to point out the difference between this image and this image. These are both stamped in Cherry Cobbler ink, but can you see the difference in the look of those images? So all I did to get this look is take my blender pen, and I'm basically just coloring over or blending over the stamped image. What that does is it blends the color and it makes it much more vibrant. So you get that nice bold red. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing with the green. I'm going to use the other end just so I don't transfer the red. So let me do this one, and then I'll lay these side by side, and you can see now this is one that I stamped earlier. So it is not as wet. Doesn't matter. The blender pen will still activate the ink that is there. So even if you stamped it like a week and a half ago, you're still going to get this effect when you blend it with your blender pen. Okay, so look at the difference between those images. So this is the one I blended, this is the one I didn't. Such a big difference, and so worth the time. I mean, how long does it take? A few seconds to blend these images out. It just makes a whole world of difference. So I'm just going to blend this one out. And the other thing that this is going to do is those sort of beaded edges that I had when I inked my stamp. It's going to blend some of that out, so you won't get that quite as prominent. There we go. Isn't that pretty? Love that look. So that's one of my hot tips for using these stamps. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and arrange these on the back of our label here. So I always like to work from front to back when I'm arranging. So I'm going to start with one of my little green leaves, and then my Cajun Craze. I'm going to add a little bit more seal here. And then we're going to tuck our pumpkin pie in here as well. And I think we're going to wait to add that one. We're going to add that one flat once we stick this down. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of glue on my little berries here and tuck that in. And then finally, this little sprig is actually from the branching out dies. I wanted something that I could just have a little hint of gold that was a little bit smaller than what was in the die set. So I pulled this little sprig die, and I just think it works really well. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and glue this onto our card base. We're going to pop it with some dimensionals. April, stamping off does not work especially well because you actually end up losing too much ink when you stamp off. Okay, you need to massage your pad rather than try to stamp off. You won't get a very clear image if you stamp off with distinctive stamps. Okay, I'm just trying to see what other questions. Deb, what keeps drying out? Your blender pens dry out? I'll let you answer that. So I'm going to take and tuck a couple more of these little leafy guys in. I'm going to trim off the bottom half of this guy, and I'm going to add just a little bit of seal, and we're going to tuck it in behind here. And then I'm going to add some berries up in behind here. And then our little acorn is just going to go right on the front, right here. So the acorn is stamped in Crumb Cake. These guys are in Mossy Meadow, Pumpkin Pie, Cajun Craze, and Cherry Cobbler. Okay. All right. So I'm going to add a little bow. Okay. So your blender pens dry out. Are you making sure your caps are on securely, and are they stored lying flat? I've had my blender pens. So I had blender pens that I had for like 15 years, and just in the last year bought a new pack. I couldn't believe the difference in the new pack versus the old, but I was still using my old ones for quite some time, so I'm kind of puzzled that yours are drying out. It's strange. Okay, so I'm gonna take and grab a glue dot here, make a little glue booger, and I'm gonna tuck it right in here where my twine kind of meets my leaves there. And then just press my bow into my glue dot like that. Okay, and then a few more of our little embellishments. This time I will use one of the big ones. tuck it in there. And we'll tuck a little guy in here. And we'll throw this guy in, I don't know, up here. There we go. Now on the inside of this one, I have just a basic white panel, and I did the same effect. So I stamped the Cajun Craze leaf, blended it with my blender pen, gave it a minute to dry, and then stamped the sentiment over top. Okay. All right. So there we go. That's number 2. Your older ones lasted longer. So these ones I've had, this one I've had for, I'm going to say close to a year, and it's still good to go. So I'm not sure. Maybe it's the dry climate out there in Calgary. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. All right. The last one we're going to do today is a fun fold. So looks like this. I love, love, love the Cajun Craze, or sorry, the crushed curry in this pattern. And it's actually a vertical easel card. So it pops up and stands like this. Okay. So I'll hold it flat, but it stands out like that. All right, so this is a really easy easel card. It's one of my favorite folds. I love easels. They're an easy, accessible, fun fold, and most recipients can figure out how they work. Okay. Yes, Laura, the dots are beautiful. All right, so let me dump all my bits out. I got a bunch. I'm using old olive twine. Aren't you proud of me? I made a point of using old olive on this one. Okay, so let's start with our card base. It's just a regular 5.5 by 8.5 inch card base. It's scored at 4 1/4, and then there's one extra score line that's at 2 1/8. Okay, so 2 1/8 and 4 1/4. So we're going to go ahead. Let me just move things out of the way here so I have some room to work. I'm going to fold it in half just like I would a regular card. And then that center score line I'm also going to fold inwards. Okay, you can see how that's going to form my easel eventually. Now that I've got that folded, I can squish it flat again because we're going to be building on it. Okay, so we're going to start by layering 2 pieces of this beautiful paper. This is actually cut from the same piece, so that's kind of a continuous pattern. These are 1 7/8 by 5 1/4. And then we're going to layer them on Matt's crushed curry cardstock that is 2 by 5 3/8. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and glue those. Almost out of Tombow here. So we're going to have our nice little narrow border. Oh, did I cut this the wrong length? Looks like I did. Let's give that just a little bit of a trim. Actually, I'm going to grab my guillotine trimmer. I think I cut this to 5 3/8. Should be 5 1/4. Yep, I did. Oopsie. So what we're going to do, so that I don't get glue all over my guillotine trimmer, I'm going to take a little scrap just from the corner of my grid paper here, and I'm just going to stick it to where that glue is, where it's going to overlap my my little guard on my trimmer here. And I'm just going to trim off a smidge, like 1/8 of an inch. That should get me closer to 5 1/4. And we're going to do the same thing on this one because like I said, they were pieces of the same sheet, and I want to make sure that I'm cutting off the same end so that my pieces match. So I need to cut this end. There we go. That should be better. Yep. All right. Let's carry on. Now I can rip this off if it'll come off. If it doesn't, not a big deal because it's fairly thin paper. It's not going to really be noticeable if it happens to be stuck to the back of my paper. Can you tell I've made that mistake a few times? I have a trick for every mistake, let me tell you. There's a mistake to be made. I've made it. All right, so we're going to go ahead and layer this onto our mat. There we go. That could have been a smidge shorter, but that's all right. And then same thing with this one. There we go. So those pieces line up like that. Okay. Now, before we glue these onto our card base, we need to make our little pop-out mechanism. If you look closely here, can you see that there's a little sort of flap that allows that label to pop up? So I have here 2 little strips of old olive cardstock. They're 1 by 2 inches. And I'm just going to go ahead and fold that in half along the score line. Now, I'm just starting to think I may not have included these little guys in the measurements on my description. I will edit that afterwards. I'll double check. I'm not worried about a nice clean score line. I just want it to be folded flat. It doesn't have to be perfectly folded. You're not really going to see them. Okay, so what we're going to do now is on the inside seam, right, where these meet, on the inside seam, we're going to glue these approximately where we want our label to go. So I'm going to kind of snug that in there. I'm going to add a little bit of glue. Never happens to you, eh? Yeah, I know. Cutting the wrong size is I'm famous for that. I'm or infamous. You decide. All right, so I'm going to line up my panels here, and I just want to make sure that when I glue my second one on, it's going to be approximately the same height as my other one. Okay, so I'm going to hold that in place. I'm going to open up my flap, add a little glue, and fold it down again. Okay, they don't have to line up perfectly, just close. Okay, all right, now that we've got our little flaps on, we can go ahead and glue these onto our card front. Let me get a fresh bottle of glue. This one's driving me crazy. Working too hard to get glue out of that guy. All right, so I'm gluing my little flaps to that center, or to the inside, so towards that center fold. And I'm just going to line up my edges, make sure it's all nice and straight. And then same thing with this one. Okay, and you see how these don't line up perfectly? It's not going to matter. They're close. Okay. All right, let's work on our label. So I have 2 more labels cut with the branching out dies. I've got one in Old Olive and then one in Basic White. We're going to stamp our sentiments on the Basic White one in Early Espresso cards, or Early Espresso ink rather. So I'm stamping "Your friendship means the world to me." And I'm going to go ahead and center that on my label here. And then that is going to get popped up on here. But first, we're going to stamp some more leaves. What have I got here? I need to stamp a Cajun Craze leaf. So here we go. We've got some Cajun Craze ink. And we've got our stamp. Yeah, it does look like a gatefold, April. You're right. I love these vertical easel cards. They're a bit of a wow, but they're not hard to make. So there's our Cajun Craze. What else do we need? We got everything else? I think we do. All right, I'm going to do a little bit of ink blending once again. Grab my blender pen. This is the one that makes the most difference when you blend out the Cajun Craze. It just really gives you vibrant color. Makes that Cajun Craze really come to life. Look at the difference. Can you see that? Here, let me hold it up to the camera. Can you see that little bit that I've colored as opposed to the bottom? Like, it's just so worth the effort of blending that out. And you don't have to do a whole lot of scrubbing, really. Like, you're just kind of reactivating that ink and spreading it around a little bit. In fact, you don't want to do too much blending because you will eventually pill your cardstock. If you really want to blend, you have to stamp on watercolor paper. Okay. All right. So we're going to go ahead and arrange our pieces on the back of our label. So I'm going to put some in the top left and some in the bottom right. So we'll start with our beautiful Cajun Craze. And then we're going to add our little, oh, you know what? I should have tucked that little sprig in first. I like it on top. There we go. And then we'll add our little berries here. This one needs to be blended too. So the Early Espresso, again, looks so much better when you blend it out a little bit. You get really nice depth. Okay, a little bit of seal. And we'll tuck that guy in there. Okay, and then down here, we're going to add our little gold sprig first. A little bit more glue. And then our crushed curry and our old olive. There we go. All right, so that is going to get popped up on our label. As soon as I figure out what I do with my dimensionals, there they are. Yeah, it really is quite shocking what a difference that little bit of blending makes. And you could, if you really wanted to, if you wanted to introduce another color, like if I wanted to add a little bit of red to that Cajun Craze leaf, I could pick up a little bit of cherry cobbler or real red ink and add that as I'm blending. You could get some sort of variation in color. There is our label. So that is going to get glued to these little flaps here. So I'm going to put a little bit of liquid glue on here. And then, ooh, my label's not very straight. I'm kind of crooked today. So I'm just going to center that on the front of my card. Okay, and you can see how that's going to pop out. Cool, eh? All right, for the inside, we need our little ledge to catch our easel. So that is going to be in the form of this little strip of DSP. So this is 1 by 5 1/4. So we're going to pop it up on our white panel. The white panel obviously is for us to write our greeting. So I'm just going to put a couple of dimensionals down the length of this strip. And I'm going to line this up with the edge of my white cardstock, which is always a challenge for me because it's white on white. And then I'm going to stamp a thankful for you greeting, just because it's easier to stamp before things are glued inside our card. So there's my thankful for you. And then I'm going to stamp a little oak leaf, a little crushed curry oak leaf, just as a backdrop for my sentiment. Just like that, just to kind of highlight it. And then that is going to get matted on a 4 1/8 by 5 3/8 inch piece of crushed curry cardstock, just to be consistent with what's on the front. And because we're going to see the matting when we stand up our easel card. And then that's going to get glued inside our card. Just like that. Make sure we're straight. Flip it over and give a burnish. All right, there we go. Okay, now we're going to add a bow because I promised I would use the old olive twine. So here we go. We'll tie a cute little bow with some old olive thread here. There we go. Trim the tails a little bit. And then I'm going to put just a little glue booger right in the middle of that left side of my label. I'm going to take a half glue dot for this one, just because it's going to be right on top and I don't want it to stick to anything if any of that glue is exposed. So a smaller little dot of glue will ensure that it's not going to stick where I don't want it. Make sure my knot is right over top of that. There we go. And then a couple of more of our little Cajun Craze dots. So we'll do one down here and one up here and a little guy down here. Oh, that's too much of a line. Let's move this over. There we go. That's better. There we go. Done and done. You like that one? All right. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. All right. So let me bring them all back, clean up my mess here, and then I'll show you a few more because, you know, I can't just make 3. So here's one. that again, I used that same oak leaf, but I did it against the DSP instead of just a solid piece, very similar in design. Here is where I got that negative oak leaf from. I cut a window and then layered it over the DSP sort of as a peek through. And then here's one that was literally made from scrap. So you can see this one I didn't blend. Can you see that the difference? Let me just hold these side by side. So this one is unblended, this one is blended. Same color palette. Kind of shocking, the difference. This one is super simple. It's just stamping with a few little gold rub-ons, gold metallic rub-ons there. These ones I did blend to get that vibrant color. And here's one where I stitched. So I did use the old olive twine and stitched my maple leaf veins there. This is one I demonstrated during my launch party, again, using that large maple leaf as a backdrop. Here's a swap card that I received where they embossed the DSP and cardstock together. So you have the texture right through on the DSP. And then this is another swap card I received. Super simple, but really, really cute. Oh, there's an ant on my desk. Very large ant. So this one uses a punch that is another online exclusive item. So there we go. You love those? Oh, thanks everybody. Let me go back to me. So I can say thank you for joining me today. I'm so glad you enjoyed these projects. I love, love, love this suite. I could just keep playing with this suite from now until Christmas. But there's a limited number of fall cards that I need. So soon, not quite yet, but soon I will be moving on to Christmas. Next week, you're going to get a little look at the Beautiful Pumpkins bundle, which is another online exclusive. Absolutely fantastic little bundle. So stay tuned for some more fall. I hope you're down for pumpkins next week, and then we'll get to some Christmas. Okay. Thanks everybody for joining me. Have a great week, and I will see you next week for another episode of Tuesday Live at 5. Bye for now.